Hey everyone, Docwell here, and welcome to another video. This week we're going to be doing tier lists again, and this is for patch 7.34e. It wasn't a huge patch, but the meta changed a little bit. But actually I'm going to be changing up how I do tier lists in the future. Probably I'm just going to keep doing it this way, where it's more subjective, it's more my opinion. Obviously I'm doing it based on statistics and everything, but really what I'm going to be doing is making like an average pub tier list. So it's not supposed to be like high level. In other words, like it's pretending it's a 3 to 4K MMR tier list. What is the best at that MMR? And so I'm going to be taking into account more of what I think is good there versus what is good high level. And really that comes down to like heroes that really rely on your team to coordinate and to play early, to go fast, all that kind of stuff, which is just not going to happen in lower MMRs. Heroes that are less independent in lane, all that kind of stuff, they're just going to be worse. Heroes that rely a lot on your team are just going to be worse in lower MMR where your team is not good. So I'm taking that into account. So a lot of times tier lists are about, the highest level. And yes, to a certain extent, if you want to get good, you can pick the meta heroes for the highest level for 10K MMR. But, if you're picking Chen at 2K, it's going to be a lot harder, I think, for you to gain MMR. Yes, it's not impossible. Don't get me wrong. You can do it, I'm sure. But it's going to be a lot harder than if you pick a really good independent hero that you can carry the game with by yourself, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's my philosophy for every single one of these tier lists that I'm going to be doing for each position throughout the week. And I'll probably repeat the same thing each time, but I'm going to be titling it a little bit different. We're going to have a little bit of a different take for these tier lists. So anyway, that's kind of my outline of what I'm doing here. So it's going to be a little bit different than what the stats say, mainly because it's for lower MMRs. But let's just jump in to the S tier for carry in patch 7.34e. And the first hero is going to be Spectre. And so Spectre is kind of one of these heroes that is a little bit more dependent on the team early, but your laning stage is very straightforward. Like, you don't have to really care that much if your support is being stupid. Obviously, if the enemy is diving you, that can be a problem. If they're really aggressive, that can be annoying for you. But overall, you're probably going to be able to get your farm and go to the jungle. And then the biggest reason why this hero is good is because you can participate throughout the entire game pretty quickly with your ultimate. You can just be around the entire map. You can get kills early. And then this hero is still a very, very good late game hero. Like, it's just always been good late game. It still is good late game. And it's just an amazing hero, I think, at all MMRs. And you're going to be able to get your farm. You're going to be able to kind of have that late game presence because in lower MMRs, it's going to be going later. You're going to be getting more space. They're not going to gank in a coordinated fashion as well. And so if this hero is good at high MMRs, it's going to be good at low MMRs. That's pretty much just like how it works, unless they change something really fundamental about the hero. And then next we have Weaver. Weaver is very good at high MMRs, but I think he's even better at low MMRs because of how independent this hero is. The one downside is that he doesn't farm super quickly. Like, he does sort of have a farming steroid. He has good damage and he can clear waves, but it's not as good as some other heroes. Like, it's not a Luna or a Sven or something like that. Not that those heroes are really great right now, but that's kind of the one downside, is you do need to be pretty good at keeping up your farm compared to some of these other heroes. But you are extremely independent. You're impossible to gank. You just run around the fights. You're not punished as much for positioning, although you do have to be a little bit careful because you can get squishy. But you can just get items that do so much damage. You're very hard to bring down. You can split push if your team is just like failing miserably and you're losing the game. You can kind of just split the map. You can buy Deso and just kill towers super quickly. This hero is very, very good in high MMRs doing all of those things. And so, like I said, at lower MMRs, it's going to be even better at that. And I think you can really just solo win games. In the lane as well, you can get really, really aggressive. Like, if you have a good support with you, you can get extremely aggressive in the lane. If you have a bad support, you can just still play passive for your farm and you're very survivable as well. So you can kind of play either style just depending on how good your support is. Like, if you can tell your support's pulling and doing all the right things and harassing and hitting spells and all that kind of stuff, well, hey, then, get aggressive, run in, get some kills. You definitely can do that. If you see your support's very bad, just sit back and get your farm, and it's going to be very hard for aggressive offlaners, aggressive forward positions to really get on top of you. Now, you do have to be careful early on that this the Shukuchi is pretty, like, high cooldown. Like, you use it and it doesn't come up for a while, so you have to make sure you're not getting too aggressive with it because it's not going to come up before they can like turn on you maybe. So just maybe in the first few levels you still need to be a little bit careful, but once you get some levels, this hero can just dominate lanes. So that's Weaver, pretty straightforward, and I think he's just doing insane damage, like, because of his talents and things like that. everything that he has now, he just scales way better into the late game than I think he used to. And so that makes him just able to delete heroes. Like, I've seen him just absolutely delete heroes. You're like, oh, this guy's supposed to be tanky. Nope, not against Weaver. He just like 3-shots them. It's kind of insane. And then lastly for S tier, we have Faceless Void. This hero's kind of just been good for, I swear, like 2 years. I don't know if they haven't really nerfed him much, or they kind of nerfed him here and there, or like buffed him sometimes. It's so weird because he just feels like he's always a staple. He's always good. And it's no different in this patch, I think, especially at lower MMRs. I think at higher MMRs, he's not nearly as good. I don't think you're going to see him picked as much. But I think in lower MMRs, he still has a good pick rate, actually, if you go to Dota 2 Pro Tracker. But I think in lower MMRs, this hero is just the beast. If you can get good at this hero, it is an absolute late game beast. And you're going to get your farm pretty much all the time in lower MMRs. Like, he is one of those heroes. It's kind of like all the top heroes here are heroes that don't farm super quickly, but they can get their farm pretty reliably because they're hard to kill, they're pretty tanky, and then late game they're just beasts, and that's still what Void does. But usually you're going to be getting some kind of farming item like Midas or Maelstrom or Mask of Man. You're going to get farming items in every game, and so you're still going to be able to keep up even though you don't have like an innate steroid. But yeah, late game, it's pretty obvious. This is one of the best late game heroes. If you can get to your 6-7 items, it's just ridiculous. You're almost not going to lose against that, timing in like 50, 60 minutes. It's just never going to happen. So it's just about getting there, not feeding before you get there. And obviously this hero does take some skill, so you do need to learn it, because if you have bad chronos, if you don't know like when to use your chrono on what hero, on multiple heroes, how to sit back, if you jump in and just feed, because that is definitely something you can do, is just jump in, get caught out and feed, then you will have a bad time on this hero. So it does take some skill. It's a little bit more punishing than maybe some of the other heroes in the game, but it's still very, very good late game. Then we have A tier. A tier are a bunch of heroes that have been pretty good recently, but have kind of fallen off, but are still very good at like mid-tier MMRs because they just are independent. They have things about them that are really tanky. They do a ton of damage quickly, all that kind of stuff. Chaos Knight is one of these heroes, very, very tanky, and you can hit this timing where you just have like Heart or a couple items. You can also farm pretty quickly. It's kind of underrated how fast you can farm on this hero. You can transition to the jungle very early, have a very independent laning stage. You have a stun, which usually doesn't happen for most carries. Very tanky, like I said. Burst damage is underrated. Like, if they don't have illusion clear and you can just pull one guy in, you can just delete him. Like, this hero is extremely independent. Now, late game, he does fall off a little bit. That is kind of the one problem. I think he's still very, very good because of his timings, but I was debating even putting him in B tier because he did get nerfed. And I think he's probably almost better as an offlaner, but I still think this hero is a beast, because if you can actually nail the timing, even though timings are worse at low MMRs because you need your team to coordinate with you, I still think this hero is absolutely insane, can farm very quickly, and just like end the game. You can honestly just get like 2 or 3 items, your second or third item being Heart. Maybe like you can get Armlet, Echo Saber, Heart, basically. And you can honestly just tell the team, hey guys, just group up, push with me, I will end the game. And you can legitimately do that. Like, I just think if you focus on farming and getting a lot of farm this hero, because you can transition to jungle early with your lifesteal, you're just going to end game so early that enemy teams can't deal with it. And I think that's kind of the one exception to the late game hero in low MMR kind of trend that I would set with this tier list. So that's Chaos Knight, even though he has been nerfed a little bit. Then Wraith King, I think, again, these two heroes, I put them up here because I think they do have pluses with them, and a lot of people are picking like carry offlaners as well, and I think these can pair with those very, very good. They're very good with other carries in the offlane because they have a stun. They kind of are dynamic in that way. But if you have an offlaner that doesn't do a ton of damage or doesn't scale very well, then picking one of these heroes as a carry might be a little bit underwhelming, but I still think they're very, very powerful, especially in low MMRs, because you can dominate laning stages. You have a stun, which is just always going to be reliable to, lock people down, stop people from TPing, pick people off. And this hero is just ridiculous at pushing towers now with the skeletons. Honestly, like, lower MMR players, I mean, even higher MMR players don't know how to deal with the skeletons, or just can't because they're so strong. And so it's going to be even harder for people that don't know what they're doing to deal with the skeletons. The skeletons just destroy towers. They push so quickly. So these two heroes are kind of the timing heroes. I think this hero, Wraith King, kind of does scale pretty well as well. He can kind of delete people later in the game. But he's maybe not the best scaling hero, but he's very good, especially paired with, like I said, other carry-ish offlaners, like a Bristle or something like that. Then we have Slark. I think he's kind of fallen off from where he was before. I think if I was doing like a high-end tier list, he might be B tier. I don't think he would be as low as C, but he would probably be B. But I put him up here because he's kind of like the discount Weaver in a sense. He's very survivable, very hard to deal with, especially like the worse your opponents are, the more they're just going to be farming alone, the harder time they're going to have to like coordinate to lock you down, all that kind of stuff. Any hero that requires the entire team to kind of use all of their spells on you at once and burst you and lock you down full to zero, it's just going to be way more difficult for them to do that when they're just worse teammates. And so I think Slark is just one of these heroes that if you know how to play him, if you're good with him, he will just destroy games. And then PA is kind of the opposite of a bunch of these heroes. Or maybe not Slark, because Slark is very good late game, but PA is like the opposite of these two, where there's tanky strength heroes that are very, very good early, have great landing stages, very independent. PA is somewhat independent in the sense that you just want to farm and you can kind of do that without the help of anybody, but your teammates need to maybe not die fully. But in the past, that was really the case, that your teammates needed to make space for you or for a hero like AM. But now, because there's so many camps around, like, you can just always secure your farm. And then the real reason that this hero is good is because late game, there's just no hero that matches this hero. This hero is just going to be a beast late game, just destroy, and is going to win the game if you get to a certain timing. If you're able to get 4 items, basically, you just win the game. Now, you still can feed against certain lineups. You still have to be kind of careful when people get MKBs and stuff, but honestly, there's just no better late game hero. You just delete the entire team, and the enemy has to play on a timer when they're playing a Phantom Assassin. And that's why this hero is so good at lower MMRs, I think, because despite all of its weaknesses, especially early, even though the laning stage is actually pretty good, despite all its weaknesses and the fact that it needs so much space, you can participate kind of early. You can have a good laning stage, and then late game, you're just an insane beast. And then Naga, I think, is the illusion hero that's the best right now. I also think this is one of these heroes that it's not that you don't need skill, because you do need skill to play the hero, but you're not like with a Terrorblade, you're punished for using your, well, not your ultimate, but your metamorphosis at the wrong time. With something like PL, you're punished for being out of position. There's a lot of positioning. There's a lot of different weird stuff you need to do to kind of stick on the back of the fight and just poke people down. It can be more of a skillful game, but if you have people that are really countering illusions hard, it can be hard to play this hero. With Naga, that's not the game you're playing. The game you're playing is just farm so fast that nobody can deal with it, and you just push lanes in so quickly that no one can deal with it, and then eventually you just hit a timing and you win, and you're still good in the late game, you're still pretty good. So I think that's like the best illusion hero right now, and it is one of these heroes that you need to learn how to play it. You need to be good with it, but if you practice it, you can be good in just stomp games. Like, if you're 3 or 4K, even like 5K, and you see a good Naga player, it can be very overwhelming and hard to deal with. Muerta, one of these heroes that I think is just good for a similar reason that like Naga's good, or even like PA to an extent. Like, it's just hard to deal with this hero. You have to, even maybe Slark, I mean, it doesn't seem that way, but you have to coordinate in a way. You have to buy the right items, have the right heroes, and coordinate in such a way where you're not committing into the team fight and Muerta just clicks R, clicks BKB, and just kills everybody. Like, it's kind of hard to coordinate that, to like retreat at the correct times, to make sure she wastes her ultimate, all that kind of stuff. And so you are a little bit squishy. You can get punished, but if you know what you're doing and you have a good laning stage, you can get to these item timings where you're just deleting the entire team. You are going to have trouble maybe against some other, like I said, slippery heroes, like maybe a Slark, maybe a Weaver. You're going to have maybe some trouble against Faceless Void if he gets the right items, if he can run away from your ult and then kind of chrono you. So she's not the best, but she's going to be extremely, extremely good just because she melts people, and people still underestimate how much damage she can do. And next we have the B tier heroes. All of these heroes are defined by kind of two things. They're all pretty good, and either they are better in higher MMR because you can play around your teammates and timings, and so they're kind of lower here because of lower MMRs. It's just harder to take advantage of that. Or they're maybe worse in higher MMRs, but because they have such late game advantage, they are kind of bumped up a little bit. So the first one is Bristleback. I think he's actually better as a carry in higher MMRs. He's kind of top tier, actually. He can just dominate games. But the problem is you do fall off a little bit late game. I mean, he is very, very good. He can do a ton of damage and is a huge threat. But you kind of need to coordinate around your team. You kind of need to participate early and constantly be fighting, kind of run at the enemy. And if you miss those timings, if that's not effective, if your team doesn't use the spells correctly and you do get bursted down and kind of feed a few times early, that can be extremely punishing, and you're not going to be as good then. So that's why I put him down here. Now, if you know what you're doing, if you dominate the lane, and if you really snowball the game, yeah, sure, you're going to crush with this hero, but it's just a little bit risky. That's also similar to why I don't love Ursa. I Like him as a hero. I think he's decent right now, but the problem is that you don't hit towers very well. You can get kited very easily. It can just feel like, you aren't able to outlast and outmatch the enemy's carry. And if your teammates aren't coordinating with you correctly, it can be kind of hard to carry the game. Now, there are games where you can just straight up carry the game because you can go, especially if you go this weird Yules build where you just feel like you're unkillable, that can be good. But even when you're very good at team fighting, it's just that you don't hit towers very well. And any hero, any carry that is not going to hit towers very well, it's just so hard to break high ground. And it can feel so bad. Like if you're against like a sniper and they just sit high ground, I just feel like as an Ursa, you're going to lose if you're like 3k MMR or something like that. It's just going to happen. I've seen it happen so many times. So that's Ursa. Lifestealer. This is a good all-around hero. I think he's pretty good, but he does have weaknesses. He's not as good late game as some of these other heroes. He's just kind of middle of the road, average, decent. There's good things about him. There's bad things about him. He doesn't do anything super well. He's pretty good early. He has a good laning stage. He farms pretty quickly, but he doesn't farm the best. He doesn't have the best laning stage. He's not the best late game hero. It's just like middle of the road all the way. And so he's just like, if you can pick him as kind of a safe pick, but he's going to have bad matchups. He's going to have bad games, just kind of right in the middle of the road. If you're consistent and you're good, you can climb MMR with him, sure, but there's just better picks. Gyro, I actually put like Gyro and Luna kind of in a similar tier and just together because they're very similar. Luna might be a little bit better. Gyro might even be C tier, but I put him here because he is good late game. He can farm. Same thing with Luna. They just like get their farm and secure their farm, and then late game they can be kind of these rapier buyers that are just very hard to bring down. And I think the big thing with these heroes is that you're going to be an item or two ahead of everybody almost by default in the lower MMRs where people just can't farm. That's just what's going to happen with both of these heroes. Like, I know Gyro, it's probably, and even with Luna, you're going to want stacks, but stacks aren't actually as important these days because there's two ancients. There's so many creep camps. You can just always be hitting creeps. And for the first 20 minutes, you're just going to get so fat, and there's almost nothing anybody's going to do to stop you. And that's why these heroes just are going to secure their late game. And then when they're in the late game, it's going to be very hard to deal with them. It does take some skill. They're not the best ranged heroes. They kind of have to go into melee. They're almost like pseudo melee heroes. So there are some weaknesses there, which is why they're not the best, but they're very good, especially in lower MMRs. And then we have the two illusion heroes that are a little bit weaker than Naga, I'd say. I kind of already talked about their problems. PL has the problems of, I think, you just have to be pretty good at the hero. I think there's, not too many lower MMR players that are going to be very good at this hero, and so you do have to practice him a lot. But if you get good at him, you can just honestly 1v5 games. You can be very good in that way. But if there is a very hard illusion counter, it can be somewhat difficult. So you just have to keep that in mind. And then Terrorblade, honestly, the biggest thing is just that you need your team to play around your meta. And if they're not able to do that, if you pop it at the wrong time or they just run away or people don't stun correctly, whatever it is, it can feel underwhelming because you do all this farming, you get super fat, and then you just can't use it with the meta timing because it's so punishing if you use that wrong. It's even like more punishing than Faceless Void because Faceless Void obviously has this huge ultimate. But you're not always relying on that ultimate. Like, you can still do a ton of damage and be extremely effective in the fight without it. Meta is almost more important to this hero than Chrono is with Faceless Void because, yeah, sure, you can be fine, but you're just not going to be the same level of threat without your meta on. Like, it feels like a completely different hero. And that's kind of the point, is that you're like this insane beast, but then without it, you don't really do much, and you're much easier to kill and bring down because you're not doing as much damage and all that kind of stuff. And then the next three heroes, these are all cheese heroes. If you're good at Morph, you can dominate games. He's not nearly as good as he once was. But that's why he's up here, because I actually think he's a lot worse than he once was. Like in pros, he might be like down here somewhere. But if you're good at the hero and you know what you're doing, you can just stomp games, just straight up. Lone Druid, I think he's better in the other positions. He can still maybe play carry, especially because you can have like carry mids and carry off lanes. So he's sort of like a Wraith King or a CK in that way, where he doesn't have to be like straight up your only carry, because that's not really going to work if it's Lone Druid, because his late game, although he can, have Ags with the bear running around, late game is just not as good. He's going to fall off. It's going to be easier to kill the bear, all that kind of stuff. So that's why he's not the best carry, but he's still very, very good. And then Arc Warden is a decent carry if you know how to play him. I mean, nobody plays Arc Warden. I think this is like the one hero in Dota that has not been fully unlocked yet, even by the pro players. I just have this feeling that no one plays this hero and no one is very good at it. Like, there's a few players that are decent at it, and maybe I'm just wrong about that. Maybe there are pro players that play it to its full potential, and it's just not that good of a hero. But I just honestly feel like this hero still has room to grow, and it's never fully viable in pros, but it's always going to be like at least middle tier in low MMRs, because if you're good at it, you can just stomp games. It's very hard to deal with. Then we have C tier. These heroes are all pretty viable. They just have like severe glaring weaknesses. Like Sven, very, very good at farming, but falls off super late game. You have to be able to farm very quickly and hit a timing. And it's just not going to feel good to do that. He's very reliant on BKB, and in low MMRs, this timing and this BKB reliance, it just feels very bad. In that way, he's not very independent. Like, yes, he's independent for farming. His laning stage is okay, but it's not independent later in the game. You need to coordinate stuns. He's easily kitable. Just like, think of him almost in the same way as Ursa in a sense. I know that seems weird because it is a very different hero, but just in terms of like late game kiting, like it's similar to that. You're going to do a lot of burst damage, but then you're not as survivable in the same way as Ursa is, and you're more reliant on your team. And then Anti-Mage is just like discount PA in a way. You're going to buy Battle Fury. You're going to farm, but the problem is you're going to farm even more than PA, and your late game is not necessarily as reliable in the sense of like, yeah, PA is just going to like 1v5 the enemy in the late game. And yes, Anti-Mage can do that in many games, but not every game he's going to be able to do that. Like, it's not always going to happen. So that's the risk with this hero. And then Monkey King, he's just kind of like bad at everything or good at everything. Like in a good patch, Monkey King is kind of good at everything. He farms, he has a good laning stage, he does a little bit of everything. But then in a bad patch, which is this is a kind of bad monkey patch, it just feels like he does everything worse than every other hero in a way. But he's not like completely trash. It's just that, you know, why are you picking a monkey? Just pick something else. Not every one of these heroes is going to be banned. So if you want a certain aspect that this hero does well, there's always going to be something else that you can pick instead, I think. And then Juggernaut, I think he's just kind of right along there with like an average hero, kind of like Lifestealer. Obviously, they're very similar with the BKB that they have built in, but he's kind of going to be like an Anti-Mage. He's kind of going to be like a PA, but then at the same time, he doesn't do as much. He's average. He doesn't do anything great, doesn't do anything terribly, but it's just not very powerful. You're going to be overrun by other carries, and now it's like there are other carries in the off lane now all the time, and you're just going to feel very, very underwhelming because of that. And then Troll, I mean, I guess you could make him work, but I'm never going to put him like above C tier or whatever. Maybe I put him B tier one time, but until his ultimate's changed, I just don't think you're going to get punished, especially at lower MMRs where your team is not going to coordinate around your ultimate. You're going to get punished for this terrible ultimate. You're going to be running at the enemy and get out of position and just die. Bloodseeker, another one of these heroes, which I know it's weird to say he's like Monkey King, but in the sense that like Monkey King is a very good carry in terms of like he can carry the game, but he's very versatile in that way. He's not like a full-on carry, kind of like Bristleback, I guess you could say. He's kind of an offlaner, kind of a carry. He's just like weird middle of the road, and because of that, it just feels like he gets outscaled. You don't really love him in a lot of different matchups. There are matchups where he is very good, and so it is kind of matchup dependent in that way, but I just don't love picking Bloodseeker in general. Like it just feels odd in this patch. Like I said with Monkey King, he doesn't do anything super well. He just does a few things decently, and maybe has some specific counter matchups, but other than that, just feel underwhelming. You feel underwhelming. TA, a hero that's kind of just a fast flash farmer, but then falls off. And that's the big reason why it's down here, is you can flash farm, you can play, pretty fast paced to get a lot of items early and then do insane damage. But there's a lot of these other heroes that are going to do very similar things. And yeah, you're maybe going to farm faster than them, but I think your late game is just like worse than a Luna. Like if you just want to farm quickly, just pick Luna. Just pick one of these other heroes that farms quickly. Like if you're going to pick TA, just pick PA. And I think that's the big difference with this hero. That's why it's down here. And then Drow, just underwhelming in terms of all the different stuff like that has, mobility these days. It can get on top of you. There's really good heroes like Spectre, Weaver, Faceless. Like just look at all the heroes that are good, and this hero just gets destroyed by all those heroes because as a carry, I mean, it's weird to say, but this hero would probably be better as like a mid or something. You don't want to rely on the Drow because you're just going to get jumped and die, and that's why it feels pretty bad. But if you have a good game, there's not a good matchups against you, maybe you can do pretty well. Just there's other ranged heroes that are going to feel way better. Like I'd rather have a Muerta if I want to do a lot of crazy damage from range. And then D tier, these heroes, like you could pick them, I guess, but they're not going to be great. Like Ricky, you don't farm. You're just going to have a very, very hard time against all these other heroes that are farming way quicker than you. This is like a counter carry, an anti-carry that is not really a carry these days. Just don't pick it. It's better in almost every other position. Medusa, this hero's fallen off a lot since they nerfed it and changed it. It was like OP forever. I still think this hero might be pretty good, considering like for lower MMRs because you do farm fast, but there's just a lot of this other stuff that's just like better. Like Medusa, you're just going to sit around and farm for a while and you're like, just pick Phantom Assassin. You know what I mean? Like, just pick these other late game heroes, not Medusa. Medusa feels bad. Alchemist is terrible. Honestly, Alchemist might be F tier. I'm just going to edit this, put Alchemist over here. Like, this hero's garbage now, dude. Because they changed it to give him, like, another ability, but that ability doesn't feel that good, and then Grieval's Greed just not as good. So, yeah, you're going to be farming faster than some heroes, but are you really going to be farming faster than, like, PA or some of these other heroes? Like, I don't know if you actually are going to farm faster and have more net worth than Aluna. Like, I don't know if you actually are. Marcy, just kind of not a carry. Could even put it in F tier, but I mean, it could work, I guess, but not really. Sniper, Shadow Fiend, they're like the same hero. They could be a carry. You can kind of hit people from the back lines, do a ton of damage, but just they're very underwhelming, have insane weaknesses. Like, Sniper just, in a way, worse than Drow in all these senses because less ways to deal with different matchups. And same thing with Shadow Fiend, kind of just a one-dimensional hero. And then Meepo is kind of a carry that, you know, it was OP there for a little bit when it had, you know, they gave it the shard and the ags and all this different stuff. And I think they nerfed it, and now it's just kind of fallen off. You never see it. And it's just like, this is the cheese hero that's kind of just the worst of the cheese heroes. So that's why it's down there. Then F tier, none of these heroes are carries. Just like, don't pick Clinks, Pudge, Natures, Dawn, Tiny, Huskar. These heroes just aren't carries right now, so just don't pick them. I mean, Alchemist, I put him over here because I think he's just garbage. Like, it's just an Alchemist patch or it's not, and it's just not an Alchemist patch. So that is my carry tier list for patch 7.34E, and that is for kind of mid-tier pubs, like around 3 to 4K, whatever your average pub is. And I think I have a pretty good understanding of that. I'm not that MMR, I'm a little bit higher. I'm like high divine, sometimes play with immortals, but I think I just have a good judge of what is decent at lower MMRs, where a lot of these higher MMR players, you know, they just see what's happening there, and it's for the high MMR, so that's not always relevant to what you're doing in your game. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.